Oh shit, I'm sorry.
Sorry for what?
You know a One Piece chapter is going to be good when people can't figure out how the hell to translate it properly. It tells you that whatever's in there isn't simple enough to be taken at face value. And let me tell you, 1069 is a good chapter. So good that I read 4 different versions of it. So, if you just read the chapter and have been out of the loop lately, there's been some discussion and debate online over the translation of this new One Piece chapter. Specifically regarding these 2 pages where Vegapunk tries to start a One Piece theory channel on YouTube and he jacks my flow immediately by making his own Devil Fruit mega theory, that lick-a-tongue conehead looking son of a bitch. So he basically explains how he thinks Devil Fruits were made, and turns out that I was only socially awkward my entire life because I didn't wish to be a Chad hard enough back in middle school. But if only it were that simple. In info dump chapters like 1069, little changes in wording can have massive implications for the rest of the story. And here we arrive at a problem, because the spoilers and subsequently each translation of this chapter left people with different impressions of what was being said. Some people thought this was a definitive answer for Devil Fruits and rushed to my comment section to tell me how wrong I was, well before the scans were even out with the actual dialogue. These guys didn't jump the gun, they jumped the blueprints for the gun. And while I'm happy to be wrong, imagine my surprise when the chapter comes out and the explanation given is more vague than Kaido's awakening. Some people ran wild with it and began theory crafting, and some kinda just took it at face value. Other people, like myself, found it confusing and decided to wait for the Sunday release. When compared with the raw scans of the chapter, the scanlation seemed to have some, inconsistencies here and there, some poor wording choice in other places, and some of the people in the community who understood Japanese were vocalizing this on Twitter, and we were all collectively looking for a clear interpretation of Vegapunk's Devil Fruit theory here, so ultimately I and many others ended up reading 3 or more versions of One Piece Chapter 1069, including the TCB version, the OP Scans version, and the official Viz release. I even went over the chapter in the original Japanese with my wife, a native speaker, and while her interpretation is only one of many Japanese readers, a sample size of 1 is better than a sample size of none. So my goal was to figure out how all this new information actually impacted the story, because it seems really up in the air right now, right? Well, the first way to do that is to determine which version is the most accurate to the original Japanese. I'll answer that for you right now. With just my beginner level of Japanese and my wife's native level of Japanese, if we were to sit down and try and translate this chapter ourselves, we'd probably come back to you with something that looks a lot like the Viz version. As a matter of fact, realizing how much was changed in the fan translations was such a sobering experience that it made me want to wait for Sundays from now on. But I'm no professional, nor a native speaker, so how could I come to that conclusion? Let's start with the TCB. Now, usually TCB doesn't miss the mark too much, but if there's one thing I've given them a bit of flack for in the past, it's usually because they take some liberties with wording and characterization. And that's fine in most cases, because usually minor differences like "don't sweat it" and "it's cool" don't change much about what's going on or change much about Luffy's character. We get the same message either way. But there are other lines in this chapter where the wording gets a little bit too original for my tastes, and ultimately explanations that are intended to be simple and poignant become overly complicated and distracting. Take this line, for example. In the original, all that's being said here is that Devil Fruit powers are unnatural and because of this are hated by Mother Nature, the sea. Simple enough, right? But in the TCB, it said that Devil Fruit powers cause unnatural aberrations? And because of this, earn the ire of Mother Nature? I mean, I don't know. So in this translation, not only do these powers cause aberrations, but the act of causing these aberrations is what earned them their hatred from the sea, at least based on what this says. And keep in mind, none of this is stated in the original Japanese. The first word here, shitagatte, means therefore or however. Sono means that, and this last word here is hushizen. Shizen means natural, and adding the hu in front is akin to adding the un to the front of a word in English, and so hushizen simply means unnatural. In this context, it is being used as an explanation for the effect of something, so this text bubble in English simply reads, therefore, this unnatural status or abnormality is ... and the next panel would follow simply explaining, quote, hated by Mother Nature, the sea. Once again, shizen here means nature, haha means mother, followed by umi or the sea in quotes, and then kirawareru or is hated by. So here's the final translation if we just take the Japanese and turn it into English 1-to-1. Much simpler, right? A lot easier to understand, right? So how do we end up with this? Next line over, we see more of this problem. In the original, it is stated that devil fruit users exist in different dimensions that someone else once dreamed up and hoped for. In the TCB, devil fruit users face an alien reality that was born not from someone else, but from endless imagination. See how this can get confusing? And all these problems are only brought to the table by fluffing up the wording unnecessarily. It's clear that the translators at TCB understand the Japanese language, and I love their work most of the time. The font's nice, the chapters look clean, the edits look clean, usually there are no grammatical or spelling errors, and I understand the desire to make the writing more impactful for English readers. I understand that sometimes things get lost in translation, but in situations like this, Oda is explaining his story through his characters. Accuracy is important. Being as direct as possible is important. This situation is not the time for poetry and artistic flair or taking heavy liberties with the wording. So for this reason, and for our purposes today, I don't want to rely on this interpretation of the chapter. Next is OP Scans, and this one I don't have much to say. The translation job here is just awful. I'm sorry. The title went from All Things in This World Are Born of Desire or Hope to The Desire of All Things Are Born to This World. What does that mean? All things have a desire? I thought it was that all things were made by desire. That changes everything, doesn't it? The title is flat out backwards. He must not fight against Straw Hat at all cost. Take, for example, the Devil Fruits has the same concept. That's quite the pressure you're putting me on. Neko no Mi? What happened to the other Neko? Did York eat it? Yeah, he requested it. That sounds like something Luffy would say. They even covered up that little picture of the authority chip in the Seraphim hierarchy, so anyone reading these scans exclusively would actually be missing canon information here. Need I say more? Until this quality level improves, I would not rely on OP scans for translation accuracy if you paid me to. And so we're left with the Viz, which, as I said before, is the closest thing we have to an accurate one-to-one translation. And if you go check out the RAWs yourself and compare them with the Viz, you'll also find that they went for the most direct, literal interpretation they could. And you'll probably come away from reading these scans a little bit less confused than you were a few days ago. Moral of the story here is, wait for the official scans before jumping to any conclusions about a particular line in the manga. If something is unclear on a Wednesday or Thursday translation, there's a good chance it'll make a lot more sense on Sunday. There's a reason the people at Viz are the officials, the professionals hired directly by the people in charge of One Piece's publication in Burgerland. Don't get me wrong, the scanlations are good for their own purposes. I think of them as a beta release of the chapter for people who don't want to wait for Sunday. It's cool to read them. I do, but you'd be a fool to judge a beta release the same as you would a final release. So now that we've arrived at the best version of the chapter, the official Viz release, what exactly have we learned about Devil Fruits? Not really that much. At least, nothing confirmed. The only new factual thing that Vegapunk states here is presumably the absence of the Gum Gum fruit in even the oldest Devil Fruit encyclopedias. Everything else from here on out is, by his own words, a theory. But is it truly by his own words or by the words of English translators? Here we go again. All three translations that we went over today use the word theory here. Even the Viz. But in the original Japanese, the word used here, kasetsu, is not the word for theory, at least not in the literal sense. Ridon is the word for theory, and that word is not here.
Dude, what the f***?
Why does this matter? Is Hidden just a nitpicky douchebag grasping at straws? Usually yes, but in this case, no. Kasetsu and Ridon are scientific words without a real casual alternative. Vegapunk is a scientist, and Oda is intentionally having him use this type of language as part of his characterization. That's also what you're seeing with all the quasar stuff that you see him stick in his sentences. And if you ask any scientist worth their salt on planet Earth, they will tell you that in the science world, there is a very important distinction between the words theory and hypothesis. A hypothesis is an idea that has yet to be tested or proven. A theory, however, is a conclusion formed based on already completed research, taking into account all the facts and hypotheses involved in order to find a fitting answer. So a theory, in a way, is proven, and it's actually not as speculative as one might think. We only have a different impression of the word theory because of its association with videos like mine where I ramble about fictional characters and fictional problems, but theories can actually do good in the world. Believe it or not. There are plenty of theories that we readily accept as fact, and that's okay, but you won't find anyone who will confuse a hypothesis for the truth. So that's why I don't buy into this whole Vegapunk Devil Fruit dimension idea yet. Vegapunk As a scientist, and Oda with his intentional word choice clearly know the difference between theory and hypothesis, even if our Western translators do not. Everything Vegapunk says here is, by his own admission, a hypothesis, not even a theory. Does that mean he's totally wrong? No, but it does mean that he isn't completely right. No matter how minor the error, we've seen that he hasn't cracked the code on devil fruits 100%. He's a perfectionist. He wouldn't be calling this a hypothesis if he had cracked the code with Momo's fruit. He does a great job of inventing things, but when it comes to the really advanced stuff, especially everything having to do with the ancient kingdom, he clearly has a track record for falling short. And no surprise there, because their technology is supposed to be well beyond his. So even if there are correct things in this explanation, it's hard to take all of it fully into account when any piece of information here could be that one piece of info that turned Momo pink or made that lightsaber attract mosquitoes and so on. Any small piece of this formula changing, such as the Mother Sea bit or the Dimensions bit or the Nika bit or the Dreams bit, take your pick, one little word or detail moves and the entire explanation changes. So is it believable? Yeah. Is it hype? Yes. Did we narrow down some of the possibilities surrounding devil fruit origins? For sure. But did we come to a definitive answer? Not even close. And I guess I have to acknowledge how this relates to my own devil fruit theory, right? I've made more than one of those videos, each over 40 minutes long. I'd say I have enough skin in the game at this point to take a shot back at this apple-headed chump. Well, first off, if Nika's fruit doesn't appear in the encyclopedias, then isn't that supporting evidence for him being the guy who created devil fruits altogether, like I said? Or it could mean nothing, and it just means that the world government got to those books first. If all things are brought into the world through hopes and dreams, and the hopes for all those various things are responsible for creating devil fruits, then doesn't that also support my idea that devil fruits were created by the voice of all things? If devil fruit users are said to exist between worlds and dimensions and their powers tap into those dimensions, then doesn't that also fit my explanation for all things having a soul and devil fruits harnessing that power from the spirit world? For all we know, the world of spirits we've seen in One Piece isn't any different from these supposed dimensions. If you disagree, then how do you explain Brook's power in the context of this explanation? Is Brook dead or not? He ate the fruit and now taps into a power that's keeping him alive. That power is said to come from the spirit world. Seems like a connection to me. So for those of you out there who have been wondering how this chapter has impacted my theory and how I'm feeling about all this, it hasn't, and I don't really care if it does. The mystery behind devil fruits is one of my favorite, most anticipated ones in the story, and I'll be happy with whatever answer we get as long as it makes sense. Could be completely different from my idea in every single way imaginable, but as long as the writing is good, then consider me a happy guy. And that's all I got for today, guys. Felt like I just had to get some of my thoughts out there, and I'm trying out some new shorter video formats, so I hope you enjoyed this one. And holiday season is upon us, so I wish all of you a very, very wonderful, happy holidays. I got a surprise for all of you before this year wraps up, so don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the music alive. That way you won't miss when it finally arrives. And as always, I hope you've enjoyed the show today because I sure enjoyed putting it on. Until next time, have a pleasant day, a good night, and a wonderful romance dawn.